two things you have to have when you go in the arena. Somebody who's willing to pick you up and dust you off when you get your butt kicked, which you will.
Yeah. A soft place to fall is what Phil always says.
Oh, a soft place to fall.
Soft place to fall, yeah.
And the second thing is absolute clarity of values. You have to be sure what your value is. And so if courage is the value, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort. You cannot have both.
Yeah.
So if you choose courage and you're clear about your convictions, even if you get your butt kicked, you fail, you get pushed to the ground in the arena, you'll still understand why you're there.
Well, Maya Angelou says courage is the most important of all of the values because without courage, you can't practice any of the others.
Oh my God, I think that's true.
Yeah, you can't. You can't be truthful. You can't be gracious. You can't be anything without courage.
And you know what Oprah Winfrey says?
What?
Because I had two quotes on my bulletin board at home, one from Maya Angelou about courage, and the other one is from you, and it says, you get from this life what you have the courage to ask for.
Oh, my goodness. Is that brilliant?
No. It's true. It's true. Did you say that?
I did say that.
To be a member of Unity, you have to multitask. You have to be able to listen and watch the lips and read the lips at the same time, even though it's off a little bit. The sync is off a little bit this morning, and I apologize for that, but it's the way it is. But I think you got the message from it. I certainly hope so. Dare to show up and be seen and live bravely. And Brene Brown is saying that the first thing is that we have to have courage. And we've been talking about that pretty much all month. The idea that we need to have the courage to show up as the Christ presence. That's a hard thing to do sometimes. And especially when everybody around you maybe is acting out. You know, I mean, if we look at the political scene that's going on, and I think it's, frankly, I think it's more the commentaries than it is the candidates, okay? Although they say things that create the opportunity for the commentaries, but the commentaries are just all over this stuff. They're going bizarre, and I don't have any sense that there's real courage there. What I have a sense of is they're saying what people want to hear or what they want to say, and they're building up the news cycle. And so the idea here is that we can step out and have the courage not only to show up, and that's important, and you're here this morning, not only to be seen, and that's really important, but also to live bravely, to take the right kind of action. And the second thing she says is that it is important that we know our values. We know who we are and what we are. Last week we talked about that idea that you really are the Christ. You really are God in action. You really are the expression of God. You may not think so at times, but you are, because that's where you're created. Created, as we say, in that image and likeness of God, which is spirit, which is love, which is all the things and all the words we try to use or we do use to try and define God. And so what I thought this morning I would do is just kind of move through some ideas. And the thing I did forget and I wanted to talk about for a minute is that she said you have to have also somebody to back you up, to support you, okay? And I want to mention that because I think it's really important, because I think that's what we do here. I think we support one another. I had a young man come in not long ago and share with me that he made a change in his job. And he was making pretty good money. But he didn't agree with management. He was a young man. And because he didn't agree with management, he had to make a decision as to whether he wanted to live life like that and put up with it, what he didn't feel comfortable with, or was he going to change and have a lifestyle and do the kind of work he really wanted to do? And he chose to make that change. And he said it took him about a year, but after a year, doing what he wanted to do, the way he wanted to do it, he was making as much money as he was in the other job. You know, that only takes courage, but it takes the fact that people were supporting him. And he was sharing with me that his parents really supported him. They didn't go, oh, honey, you know, I'm really worried about how you're going to make a living. I'm worried that you might move back in with us. Any of those kind of things. Instead, what they did is they said, do what's right for you. Step out boldly. Show up. Be seen doing what you want to do. And as you do that, you then live bravely. Here at Unity, what we create is an environment for people to grow spiritually. Now, that's a nice statement, but what does it really mean? And I think what it says is an environment here where people can speak up and share their truth. And sometimes it takes courage to do that because not everybody wants to hear their truth. To show up in such a way that they are able to connect with one another so that when something goes wrong in their life, they know they have somebody to back them up. When they step out bravely and it just doesn't go the way they thought it was going to go, they have somebody to back them up, to support them, to say, I love you just the way you are. You may consider what you did a failure, but I don't. You may consider what you did wrong, I don't. Instead, we all learn through experience. And so we back up each other up with that. And so I really think that what we offer here is this opportunity, this environment where we can kind of catch each other's backs, if you would. And I've seen it done here in so many ways. And, sometimes it happens, I don't know anything about it. I hear about it 3 months later, 4 months later, 6 months later. I'm sure many times I don't even hear about it. But people aren't running around going, oh, I help so-and-so, I help so-and-so. They just do it because they want to do it because they love that person unconditionally. And so one of the things we offer here at Unity is this idea to be courageous because you have somebody to back you up, somebody who is going to support you. You have prayer chaplains here who want to pray with you. And if each of us has certainly a choice, but some people are uncomfortable praying not only out loud but with other people. It takes a little bit of courage to tell somebody something specifically you want them to pray about. And so if you are in that situation and you kind of avoid your prayer chaplain call, okay, I would suggest to you that you take it. That if they're calling the wrong time for you, let them know you would rather for them to call at a different time. And step out there and take the courage to be in prayer with somebody else. Prayer is the foundation of unity. And so as you take that opportunity to do that, and we offer that opportunity, again, what you'll find is not only is there a prayer chaplain, but behind that prayer chaplain, there is a community here to serve you. So if we are going to back people up, then the other thing we work on here is this opportunity for transformation. Now, we use that word a lot. And people can go, okay, yeah, all right. But on an individual basis, when we see that happening, it is so powerful. When we see it in people's eyes, when we see it in the way they start to look at themselves, when we see them taking a part of their life that isn't quite on center and centering it, because they're starting to understand who and what they are. And more importantly, they're starting to understand their core values. What are my real core values? Not what has the world taught me, maybe my parents taught me, maybe a teacher or a minister taught me, but what are my own core values? And I'm going to identify a few this morning. They're right on our website. One of the things we talk about here is abundance. And I really call it living life in an affirmation, living life gratefully. That's what abundance comes from. And so we teach these principles of always be grateful for everything in your life. Does that take courage? Yeah, sure it does. Because somebody tells me something that I don't like, tells me something that I'm not doing properly as far as they're concerned, shares with me a mistake I made, and maybe does it nicely, we still don't like it sometimes, So what we have to learn to do is to be grateful for that person sharing that message. Because the only thing it does is help us grow, help us experience life and one another more richly. And so we step into this idea. The other thing is that being grateful means you live longer. How about that? That's what they're telling us. Anybody here doesn't want to live longer? Okay, well, thank goodness. Okay, well, okay. I got one. I always get one, okay? But they're not serious. So what we want to do is learn to live life through this attitude of gratitude so that we are stepping into life and everything that's happening in me is sacred and around me. It's all sacred. If I'm having a spiritual experience, it cannot not be sacred. If I'm living as a spiritual being, everything that's working in my life is spiritual, is sacred. And it's sacred because I can learn and grow from that experience. I can step into the experience. I can lean into the experience. And as I lean into that experience, which may not feel comfortable, that's where it takes the courage, then I can grow. And so we look at this idea of abundance or being grateful, or we call it prosperity many times in unity. The second thing that we share together, and our folks wrote these up, and we've reviewed them several times, is spiritual growth. And what does that mean? Well, what that really means is that we know that you cannot be transformed in your way of thinking. And it's not that there's anything wrong with your way of thinking, but it's just not making you feel joyous. It's not making you feel at peace. It's not creating in you zeal, faith, those kinds of powers. You just don't feel it. And when we sit in that situation, then what we need to do is step back and say, how do I change that? And we do it by recognizing one of the core values for most people today is spiritual growth. And we do that through prayer, we do it through meditation, we do it through classes, we do it by sharing with one another, we do it through spiritual counseling. A lot of different ways we do this. So that each and every one of you have that opportunity to understand that your spiritual growth is a core value. You're created with it. It's innate. And so what we need to do is say, okay, how does that show up? And how do I show up as a spiritual being? And how do I grow spiritually? But last week I said that's not the right question. It's what do I need to get rid of so that I know that I am a spiritual being? And so we have that opportunity, as I talked about last week, to share with one another and to release any baggage that's getting in the way of understanding that we are the Christ, of understanding we are the manifestation of God, of understanding that we can make a difference in the world and in our lives. And so we have this idea of spiritual growth. Another core value is unconditional love. I can't help it. I always put that word unconditional in front of it. Because I think there's a distinction between conditional love, which is what most of us have been raised with, most of us have been involved in many times, is conditional love. I love you as long as. And you know, I've done a lot of wedding vows. And I've never said, now, do you agree that you will love this person as long as they act the way you want them to act? As long as they weigh exactly the same thing they weigh today? As long as. I've never done that. Nobody selected that as a choice. You know, it's because it's not part of our vows. It's not part of who we are and what we are. It's the unconditional love is one of the reasons we have the courage to have a partner. It's one of the reasons we have a courage to have relationships. And we can do that by honoring one another, by agreeing and disagreeing, as we say around here, in love. Don't do that just here. Do it at home. Do it in the workplace. Wherever you are. Learn to agree and disagree in love. That is a quality of unconditional love that you can exhibit and that you can show up and become. What we believe is that Jesus' teachings of love uplifts heals, harmonizes, prospers, and brings us peace. We say that on our webpage, by the way. That's what it does for us. And so we step into unconditional love. The fourth thing is being inclusive, and we know what that means here. There is nobody who can walk in that door. Nobody that can walk through that door is not welcome. Okay? Sometimes they can be a challenge, but they're still welcome. Unless they become totally disruptive, and we haven't had that one time in 10 years. And that person had a chemical imbalance. We knew that. But everybody is welcome, and we don't care what you look like. We don't care what you think. We don't care what you believe. Isn't that interesting? That you're still welcome here. And, I talk about what to believe. When I was in El Paso, I had a young man who joined our church. And it was interesting that he said to me, well, I can't give up the idea that Jesus Christ died for my sins. And I said, well, that's fine. He said, but I know God's here. I feel it. And I don't understand why. I mean, this was our conversation, okay? And I said, well, is that what you feel? And he said, yes. I said, well, join us. It's fine. And if you start preaching that, you probably won't find many takers or people comfortable with it, but it's fine. And so what he did was he brought in the most new members of anybody in the church. Because when he would talk to somebody and they would say, well, I don't believe that, he'd say, here's where you need to go to church. Okay? He'd say, well, you've got to believe in Jesus. They say, I don't agree with that. Here's a place you can go to church. I go there, and I find God there. Isn't that kind of cool? Because what he understood, I think, real down deep in his heart, was that he felt included. So don't forget, not only do we include people of different sexual orientation, not only people of different color, not only people of different cultures, whatever, we also accept people of different beliefs. We don't run them off because they don't agree with us. At least I hope not. Because we're not giving them an opportunity to grow spiritually, or ourselves, frankly, when we do that. And so we open the doors to each and every person. We are very inclusive. The next thing is that we have a core value that says this is a place for transformation. You've heard it a lot of times. I alluded to it this morning, that we affirm that we are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience in the human condition, and that what we foster is holistic and intuitive opportunities for our personal information. What we know, and by the way, Vicki's not here this week because she's at a spiritual counseling course, a 4-day course. Now, somebody said to me, well, gosh, I thought she knew all about you need to know about that. And I said, I don't think she does. Because one of the things that's happening in the counseling field is that we're moving out of the idea that the spiritual, the holistic person shouldn't be talked about in counseling. I mean, that's been the last 10 years. Counseling has moved in that direction. Social workers have moved in that direction. Psychologists have moved in that direction. Because they're coming to understand that that might be the most important thing that people have to understand is that they are whole and they have to treat the whole person. And so Vicki's going through some courses which will possibly change the direction of how we do counseling here. And what I mean by that is that what we were taught is that you counsel people 3 times in spiritual counseling. And then if they got some real problems, you let them go somewhere else. You share, you send them to a professional. Well, Vicki is a professional, and we have a number of professionals in Unity. And what they're saying is we need to do more than that for people, but we need to keep it as spiritual counseling. So that's what she's going through, and there's a structure, and she said to me, this is a wonderful place I'm going to. It's not a Unity meeting, by the way. And she said they all talk Unity. They don't even know it. They talk about the oneness. They talk about presence. They talk about all the answers are within you. She said, this is fantastic. So she's really enjoying herself. But the most important thing is that there are many ways in which we can transform our lives, and we are offering that to you, and you are offering the same to us, and we appreciate that. And so we want to look at that whole person because that's where transformation takes place. And as we look at Brene Brown's concepts of the idea that we dare to show up that we dare to be seen, and that we live bravely. And we may change this on our website, but we said there are 3 ways we affirm our truth, or we affirm our spiritual values, our personal values, our core values. One is that we do it in thought. We learn to release anything that doesn't work for us and to step into that thought that does work for us. That's called a divine idea. We don't have the same thoughts each and every day over and over again without any change. They say it's 65,000 times a day I have a thought, or I think. I think, for me, thinking is the habit I have of thinking the same thing. A thought is when I get a new idea and change the habit. Just for clarification, I'm not sure that technically is correct. I'm not sure psychologically it's correct, but that's the way I see it, okay? That, just to clarify, my thinking is what I think repetitiously. It's a habit I have over and over. My thought is when I step in and say, something I am thinking isn't good for me, and I need to change that. And so what we do is we teach this idea that we affirm the truth of oneness and power through our thoughts. And that we do that through the law of mind action. By changing our thoughts, we do it through prayer and we do it through meditation. That's not much different than the idea that we dare to show up because we're working on our thoughts, because that's what's going to help us show up differently. The second thing we say is that we do it in action, that we foster peaceful communication with others, that we use our spiritual values to foster peaceful communication with others. And we do that here. You know, I was just at a meeting, and I had 3 ministers who were talking to me about all the challenges they were having with their board, all the challenges they were having with some people in the congregation, some of them. And they were pretty serious as far as they were concerned. And they said, what's happening at your church? And I go, it's kind of boring. You know, we all kind of love each other. We work it out. We talk. We don't always agree. Vicki and I certainly don't do everything perfectly. We just show up, and we show up together, and we love each other, and we work it out. We talk about it. We have dialogue. And one person said, it's a minister, okay? Richard, I hadn't thought about that. What's that? Having a dialogue with the person who disagrees with me. I said, well, you ought to try it out. You know, it's the only way you're really going to get the issue solved. And the other thing is that what we all have to do is behold the Christ, behold the presence of God in each and every person, and see through their actions. And then in life itself, which is the third way that we say we show up, which is living bravely. We are open to peacemaking. We are open to looking at social issues occasionally. We certainly are open to discussing them on a regular basis. We are open to looking at life in such a way that, again, we can step into it, but it does not control us. We can step into it so that we're in the world, but not of the world, as we say. And that's a very challenging, courageous thing to do. Because if you do that in your job, if you do that in this church, if you do that in your community, you are going to be challenged. And the other thing is, when we dare to be brave, we step out and we do something that nobody else thinks we ought to do. It's too risky, and we dare to do it because we feel led to do it from within ourselves. And that's the difference. I can give you 10 ideas of how you can make more money tomorrow. I've talked about it before, okay? And all of them take risk. But if it comes from Richard and it's not your idea and you're not comfortable with it, then you're not being guided by Spirit. Instead, you're being guided by the desire to make more money. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, you know, we might have a desire to make more money, but let Spirit guide us in that direction. Don't guide it ourselves, because then we come from our woundedness most of the time. So, in Ephesians, it says, endeavoring to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace is what unity is all about. It doesn't say it's what unity is all about. Okay? I added that to the scripture. But endeavoring to maintain the unity of spirit in the bond of peace is what we are all about. And Jesus said, I am at peace. In the last week of his life, knowing that he probably would be crucified, he said, I am at peace. For I am not the peace that the world talks about. And I think what he was really saying is, as he looked back at his life, he was saying, I am at peace because I lived the purpose that I was supposed to live. I am at peace because I said the things I needed to say. I am at peace because I showed up, I lived bravely, and the other one is I was seen, okay? I think that's what Jesus was saying. And so I just want you to listen to this clip by Renee Brown. It's another one, giving you an idea of where she is, and it's kind of interesting.
Somehow we have become a culture where being disengaged, I don't really care about that. Who cares?
And the cynics. The cynics.
Yeah.
Cable television filled day and night with it. It's just crazy.
It's the biggest armor ever. It's almost like disengagement is cool now. You're not supposed to care.
Yeah.
Like when I did Super Soul Sunday, like cool is something that's really hard for me to get out from underneath, which is part of like how people think of you. I had to write a note. People ask me all the time, why do you always wear jeans or a blue jean jacket? You know why? Pockets. Because in my pocket is a little thing that is permission slips. I keep permission slips that say, you have permission to be excited when you meet Oprah. You have permission to be giddy. You have permission to laugh. You have permission to ask for a picture. You have permission to be completely uncool. It's true, right? I mean, yeah. Because, it's true. Because cool is armor. It is absolutely armor. It's so easy to go through life. I mean, here's what I have said recently this is my pledge. At the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of my life, I want to be able to say, I'm probably gonna cry, that I contributed more than I criticized. Yeah, that's it.
Wonderful. That as I go through my day and my week, as I go through my year and my lifetime, that I can look back and say that I lived life by showing up. I lived life by stepping out. I lived life bravely and was willing to stand for what I believed, to stand in my core values, and to be seen in such a way that it inspired others, to think in such a way that it inspired others, and to live in such a way that inspired others. If somebody can say that when I leave this world, I'd be a happy person. They'd be lying a little bit because I know of a few things, but that's okay. I'd be a happy person. So I ask you just to consider this week, what are my core values? Am I living them? And where am I out of sync? And if I'm out of sync, what do I need to do to get in sync? Because it takes courage. So thank you very much.